Hi, how are you?
Great, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Bear with me a little. My voice is a little weak today. I have the flu and it keeps going out. So.
No problem. I was going to ask how you're feeling. I know that you were under the weather on Monday, so.
Yeah, I'm not feeling great, but I didn't want to. The DVD comes out soon, and if we didn't do this today, we probably would have missed a chance to do it. So I wanted to do it.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, let's jump right into things then.
Great.
Obviously, Let the Right One In being translated to an American film was a hot property, so to speak, in Hollywood. How did you get involved and come to be the director of it?
Well, it was sort of a long journey. I mean, I had just finished Cloverfield, and it was January 2008, and there was a movie that I wrote before Cloverfield that I wanted to get made as a sort of an independent, character-based thriller, I guess you could say. Really definitely an independent movie. And Naomi Watts had been attached to star, and we were going to go forward, and then there was a scheduling conflict, and the movie fell apart, and I ended up going and doing Cloverfield, and I thought because of the success of Cloverfield that I would have a chance to go make this sort of passion project, and it turned out it was a very hard moment to do that. And so a lot of independent companies started going under, like Picture House, Bob Burney's company, and Vantage, and there's a big contraction in the independent film world. And I met with Overture, and I showed them the script, and they thought that they really liked the script. They said they thought it was beautifully written, but that it was just, as everything that was going on right then, where the contraction in the industry, it was too challenging to make a movie like that right then. And they said, we would love to work with you, though. We love Cloverfield, and we really like the writing, so maybe we could find something. And I said, well, what would you like to do? And they said, well, we are pursuing the rights to this Swedish film called Let the Right One In. And I didn't know anything about it. It was about January 2008. It didn't come out until October 2008. So it was about 10 months before it was even released in the United States. And It hadn't come out anywhere, actually, yet. There were some festivals. I think it was in some festivals at that point that they must have seen it overseas or something. And then I think it made it to the Tribeca Festival. I think that's where it debuted in September of 2008. And my first response was that without even knowing anything about it, I said, I don't really know if I'm interested in doing a remake. And they asked me to at least please watch the movie. And I did, and I was blown away. I thought it was great. And I called them up the next day, and I said, the movie's terrific. I don't think you should remake it. And they said, well, we really want to. Please think about it. We don't even have the rights. So why don't we just stay in touch and you think about it? And if you're not interested, then we'll move on. But you'd let us know. And they ended up not getting the rights. Actually, Hammer Films got the rights, and Overture approached them. They liked the project so much that they said, can we distribute the movie in the United States and become your partner? And that's what happened, but that took a number of months. It took like 2 or 3 months, I think. And during that time, the story kind of wouldn't leave my head, and I decided I would read the novel, and I was blown away by the novel. And reading it, it was all sort of set in the 80s, and growing up in Sweden at a time when I was about the same age, because John Lindquist, the author, and I are about the same age.
Right.
And I was thinking about the United States at that time and sort of coming of age, and I thought, well, maybe there is some way to be very true to this story, which I loved, but to try to sort of recontextualize it and try and take what was this really amazing Swedish myth, is almost how I saw it, and sort of move it into an American context and make it an American myth. And so with that in mind, I decided, as it kept sort of percolating in my head, I would write to John Lindquist. And I did, and he was very gracious. He said that he loved Cloverfield and that he thought it was a fresh spin on a very old kind of tale, the Godzilla story, and that he was trying to do the same thing to do a fresh take on the vampire tale. But he said that the thing that meant the most to him and what I had written to him was that I spoke of this personal connection I felt to the coming of age story, and he said that was the most important thing to him because aside from the vampires, the story was the story of his growing up, his childhood.
Right.
And so this kind of, strange path led me to suddenly say, well, I kind of want to do this. And it seemed like a strange sort of way to do it, but the truth of the matter is that of all the things that I could do at that moment, it was by far the most personal project that I could get involved in, and I kind of fell in love with the idea of it. And all of this was before the Swedish film came out to tremendous acclaim, and probably had the film come out to tremendous acclaim prior to my making this decision and starting to write the script, I would have given it even a harder second thought and maybe not done it because, once that happened, then I started thinking, I knew the movie would be well received, but I didn't know how, you never know how a movie's going to be distributed and how it's going to get out there in the world. And it was so widely acclaimed, not just acclaimed, but widely acclaimed, that I suddenly thought, oh my gosh, maybe I've embarked down a path that is a no-win situation. Maybe there's no way, even though I feel there's a very personal connection to the story, maybe no one will even give us a chance. Maybe they won't even be into the movie. But I realized at that point I was so far down the path and was already so invested in it that the best thing I could do was just put my head down and just sort of make it from a place of sincere, love of the story and a personal connection, and that's what I did. But it was definitely something that gave me pause, and then I realized the only way I could sort of get through that was just to put it out of my head, because the movie was so acclaimed.
And now, comparing your first two movies, obviously they're about as opposite as they can get. I mean, Cloverfield is this frenetic, kind of crazy film, and then this is a very slow, deliberate, movie. Was it challenging for you to adapt your directing style to fit these kind of two different films?
What's funny is, in everything that I've ever done, it's much closer to, like the TV work I've done, and even I did a film actually many years prior to that, and the style of that is much closer to Let Me In. The thing that was very different for me was Cloverfield, and that was purely a formal concern. That was because Cloverfield was all about basically this concept, which was, it's interesting because there's one thing the thing that I really love about movies and the cinematic experience and what excites me as a director is the idea of a point of view experience, of taking you through a story through a character's point of view and essentially putting you in their shoes and making you identify with that character in a situation that normally you might not. If you were watching from the outside, you might judge the character, but as you experience it a certain way, you start to find yourself aligned to their situation, at least feeling what they're going through. And that actually did have, that was the way I approached Cloverfield too. It's just that it wasn't through the point of view of the main character. It was literally the handy cam in his hand.
Right.
And so that frenetic style is because the movie was about somebody who was in this chaotic situation and basically trying to survive the night. And in a moment where something was happening around them that they could not fully process or understand, because that was not the vantage point. It was supposed to come from the vantage point of being at the center of something you didn't understand and the panic about that. And that visual style obviously was radically different from anything that I'd ever done, and certainly very different from Let Me In. But the point of view concept is the same principle, actually. And so in adapting the story, the thing that I really wanted to do as much as possible with Let Me In was take it and put it into the boy's point of view as much as possible and really focus the story through this coming of age perspective. And, that is obviously, given his life, it is a much more quiet, intimate world. It's a boy who's incredibly isolated and very lonely, and there's a lot of sort of despair and quietude. So it was, of course, quite different from Cloverfield, but the concept behind it was the same, actually, in a really strange way.
Right.